Well, hi there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Don McKeag Show, a return from the past. Some I have seen in Plymouth and the supermarkets who have mentioned that we have not been doing our show. Kenny Bukes and I. Unfortunately, my pal Kenny became ill with a serious condition, but he's on the mend, and he will be back strong and full-time soon. I am, however, beginning to try to put together some of the fill some of the gaps that have occurred, of course, since this very colorful, shall we say, and controversial presidential election, which unfortunately, of course, we were unable to report to you. I am therefore going to give you a background of myself. My name is Don McKeag. I'm from Weymouth, Massachusetts, born and bred there and educated, good public education. I went to the University of Massachusetts in Amherst. I then went into the business world in Quincy with my father, who owned a stationery store. And then I left that and went into teaching, where I taught English and coached in Rockland and Hingham, Massachusetts. I give these backgrounds because I'd like to think that after living into my 70s, that my experience in business, in education, my educations that I've had on the real world, hopefully qualify me to comment, which is what we've been doing on a regular basis, and we'll try to start doing again as Ken gets feeling better. The restaurant business was where I ended most of my career, other than talk radio. Some may be aware that I do a talk radio show, as I have for over 20 years. I used to be on Cape Cod, WXTK, every morning. But then I had the businesses, and I went only to my own show, and I am still on 95.1 FM every Saturday morning from 11 till 1. It's a conservative show. I am a conservative, but most of my life I was a conservative Democrat. My first presidential election where I could vote was John F. Kennedy versus Richard Milhouse Nixon. And I tell people on the radio, too, the young people especially, when I say young, I mean even in their 40s, this last election was such a shame from the standpoint of it being a personality and a personal qualification rather than principles, rather than recognizing, as I believe, many of the votes were cast because of conditions that the general population, both Democrat and Republican, were tired of. They did not like Washington. This is not Republican and Democrat, in my humble opinion. So I am not a Republican who was a conservative because of my republicanism. I am a conservative because I believe in conservative principles. John Kennedy was conservative when it came to programs, which I still am. But when it came to, he was liberal, as I am, when it came to governmental programs and helping others. When it came, however, to running the government, he was very conservative fiscally. We don't have that in both parties now because they, unfortunately, it has paid off for them, and that is that they buy votes by supporting people who should, in many cases, be supporting themselves. We've also seen an undermining of the Christian Judeo principles that this country was founded on. And we've seen it in the courts, and we've seen this come as I believe, a deterioration of behaviors, a deterioration of appearances, a deterioration of how people talk to one another. I don't know where we're going to go now when everything's done on cell phones. When you see families go into a restaurant, the mother and father and the two kids, all four of them are on their cell phone. They're not talking to one another. Unfortunately, that isn't that rare an occurrence. So I've taken upon myself to stay on the radio and to return to this television venue, public television, in the hopes that I might give you some facts and convince you that this is not a political party support. Both parties, I mean, Republicans won both houses of Congress, the Senate and the House of Representatives. Does not mean that the public has gone Republican. Unfortunately, some of those Republicans benefited only because of the frustration, I believe, of the general population with the Democratic programs, which over these years have failed. They've failed miserably, financially and morally. Again, these are my comments, but I will try to give factual data. It's time for more facts and less fiction, and it's time for more facts and less feelings. Feelings has been what's generated and really deteriorated our culture, I firmly believe, having seen the difference. When you have people who are looking for ways to find fault racially or educationally or, again, even medically, this has an impact that carries through and, of course, expands greatly into the seats of our government and into, of course, our personal value systems. I wanted to mention about the media, because it's time that the truth again be told. The other thing is to remember that, you know, we have all sorts of information available just to read it, read the past. We've always learned that those who do not learn from the past are doomed to repeat it. But if you do not read it, do not hear it in schools, then it really speeds up the deterioration, which again has happened. Schools, I believe, have been taken over by the liberal establishment, and they have succeeded in changing much of the motivation of a good education. You see it financially, it's disgraceful, but you also see it in subject matter. We're a disgrace, and the NEA has done nothing about it as far as our ratings. Depending upon which polls you look at and which country, we're as low as 23rd in worldwide ratings of education to our young people. Yet we spend 5 to 6 to 7 times as much per pupil. Now, there are those who say, well, that's because we have to take we're talking public schools. We have to take all the kids, we have to this, well, that is just not fair. It is part of the problem, yes. But to think that hard-working, middle-class families aren't comfortable sending their kids to public schools, which has been going on for a long time now, which is causing the rise of these, other options. We've had Catholic schools for years. They're paid less, but the public has to, the family has to pay not only their property tax and their education, which now is an unheard of. 75% of people's property tax in towns now goes to education, which is open 180 days of a given year. Closed every week. I did it. There are wonderful teachers, but I will tell you, the reality has gone. My wife and I both taught school. We were not paid a lot of money. We didn't go into teaching to make money. We didn't go into teaching to not work summers. Now that's a given. We have all sorts of interruptions, which I'll go into at other times. But the charter schools, now we just had on our last vote a bill, I think it was question 2. And I was against it because, once again, it is not going to cost, it was conveyed as it was going to take money away from the public schools. But if you listen to the first commercial, conveniently they changed the commercial. The first commercial had a teacher saying she was for it, and that it was bogus, that we were going to lose money from our public school coffers. Because, she said, there was going to be an additional $234 million set aside in the state budget to cover for those losses. So there again, you and I, the taxpayer, parents, were going to be charged more for education. I believe totally in education, but I also believe that 50%, I would say 40 to 50% of today's college students don't belong in college. They are there specifically either to please their parents, but most importantly, they are there to keep fannies in the seats so that the colleges can continue to pay more and to charge more. When I went to the University of Massachusetts, I know it was a long time ago, but it was $1,000 for tuition. Now they're up to like $28,000 to $35,000. Some people are spending $55,000, $60,000, $62,000 a year to send their son or daughter to college, and that puts them in debt, either the parents or, unfortunately, the students themselves, who have to now pay over the years, for years, to pay that kind of money back for college, only to get out and not have a job. Many don't have jobs. No one has ever done a true study of that, because the elitists that run the media don't want the truth in that respect. Now, if we can, we'll get back to history and to having answers that are out there. And one of the things that I find kind of humorous, I love to read, and I like biographies, and of course I taught English. Now, a lot of people don't know, but back in the 1800s, late 1800s, Mark Twain, Samuel Clemens, considered probably one of the great humorists of all time, as well as a fine author, best known for Tom Sawyer and others. He said, and I quote, "Those who do not read the newspaper," now remember, this is before television and radio, "those who do not read the newspaper are uninformed. Those who do read the newspaper are misinformed." Now imagine, this is going on 150 years ago, imagine. So things have not changed much. But what I wanted to tell, because I am so concerned, I can't even watch the mainstream media. They are, first of all, they're vicious, but they, again, it isn't about the candidate, it is about the principles. They do not like ever being proven wrong, and they will not admit to it, which is why I say they are a very dangerous bunch. And something has to be done, but I have no idea how it can. Now, here's some interesting facts about that. First of all, and I have the ones listed. Think about this when you think, oh, well, that's just because you're conservative. And no. I am talking about facts. Up until 1983, ladies and gentlemen, there were 50 or 51 companies that owned and were responsible for 90% of the communication information coming to us. 51. By 2011, that went down to 6. Think about this. You talk about conflict of interest. I laugh when they talk about, again, these are just facts. Forget the candidates. Forget which party you support. Do you care about the truth? Do you care about the truth? Do you care about facts? Or do you want the world to be the way you think it should be, even though it isn't? You have to ask yourself this. But now they're all over Trump's family and his businesses about conflict of interest. And yet, what could be more conflicting interest than Mrs. Clinton being a Secretary of State and taking donations from other world leaders? I don't care if you like her. This, again, it isn't about her and it isn't about Trump. It's about what is conflict of interest then. College professors. I ran for state rep, by the way. That's another thing that I've done. I'm not boasting. I'm just telling you I have qualifications that I want you to know that most politicians never have. Do you know what politicians too often do now? Over 80% of them in Congress, 83% I think was the last, are lawyers. What those who want to be a politician first do is they study political science at BC or some other college. They get out and during the summers they work for a politician in the office. This is male or female. Then they go to law school, and while they're in law school or after they're in law school, they run for political office. They've never taught school. They've never seen what goes on in schools. They've never owned a business. They've never made a payroll. All they've done is learn how to run for office. That's both parties now. And when you're in lawyers, you know, we've been screaming, all of us. When I was a Democrat, I remember fighting for tort liability. I don't think our young people know even what tort liability is. And what it is that unusual punishment when a crime is committed, where lawyers get millions for cruel and unusual punishment after a crime, not just the crime. And no one's suggesting that there shouldn't be some kind, especially in these extreme criminal cases. But not millions and millions, 50 to 60% of which, well, maybe I'm a little high, 40 to 50% of which goes to the lawyers. Now, conflict of interest. If you've got 80+% of Congress, male and female, being lawyers, do you think they're going to pass any tort liability when if they get defeated in their next election, they go back out into the law? I'm talking about the Bushes, I'm talking about the Kennedys, and the same thing, another huge conflict of interest that Trump is trying to do something about are the lobbyists. That's been a disgrace for years. I have friends in the Democratic Party, big time ones. Good people. I like them politically. But again, why should a politician that's had drinks on Fridays or Thursdays after a session in the House or in the Senate, and goes drinking with fellow senators and fellow congressmen or parties and socially goes with them. Then they're out of office and now they become lobbyists and they have an open door to the friends they've made for 25 and 30 years. And we pay. They make this kind of money from the company or whoever that they're lobbying for. But let Trump get in there, or let a conservative, or let someone that the media doesn't like, especially if it's a Republican or a conservative, every little thing, that it becomes a huge focus on why that particular person is either unfit for office or is criminally, taking advantage of their position. It's really laughable, except it isn't. Now let's look, by the way, at who these 6 companies are. Now there are divisions. Now you can look this up. Everything I'm going to tell you today and every day, I'm going to try to make sure is factual. That's the difference between people who have a particular axe to grind or a financial gain. That's what's happened in politics too. Getting back to how much we pay teachers now, which, as far as I'm concerned, is too much money. Oh, they go furious when I say that. My wife and I said we didn't make much money. I played the piano and landscape. She waitressed. We had a wonderful life. I bought her a little Mercedes. We bought a waterfront house. How do you do that if you're not making enough money? I'm not saying teachers should suffer, but I'll tell you, it's not the way, that's not the motivation to help teachers out. The motivation is, and the Democrats have done it very successfully, and that is to control the teachers' union, the NEA. When I was teaching and I was a Democrat, I was furious because the Massachusetts Teachers Association magazine always supported Democrats. I was a Democrat, and I used to talk at the faculty meetings, and I say, and to the union members that came around, I said, you know, we have parents whose kids are Republicans or independents. We shouldn't be supporting any party as far as I'm concerned. Personally, you can do anything you want. A teacher can go and campaign for a Democrat. I don't have a problem with that. But when you have a mass block that's a guarantee to teachers or to police or to fire, public employees, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the liberal Democrat president who did a lot of good things that needed doing back there in the 30s, he said never should public employees be unionized. Excuse me, not to be nasty, but because he recognized, I'm sorry, excuse me, he recognized the power that a union in a public employee field would always wield, because they don't have a bottom line. That's why your property taxes are so high educationally. Again, you don't have to agree with these things. They happen to be facts. I wish our young people and and of course the teachers aren't going to tell people what socialism is, because that's what socialism is. The Democratic Party is a socialist-oriented party now. That's why I left that party. Not to become a Republican, but I wanted to be a conservative person. Now, let's look at these 6 industries that own and control your news every night when you watch. I don't care if it's NBC, CBS, all of them. They have the control of those people on the panels giving you the news, and they can twist it and say it any way they wish, but it always comes from the top. This is what's so dangerous. I'd feel the same way, by the way, if this was all conservatives. Try National Public Radio, NPR. You think anybody like myself, a conservative, have you ever heard a conservative on NPR? Ever? No. I looked into it. Tried to get a place on there. No. Public radio, PBS. Ever see a conservative on there? No. Then you have people screaming over Fox, like Fox is some kind of conservative element. They're just as soft in certain areas as every one of the rest of them. Yes, they do have conservative viewpoints. But anyway, let's look at, here are the 6 major companies, and I will then also give you the breakdowns of the subsidiaries that are the subsidies that are subsidiaries that are associated with them. First one is GE. Now, under the umbrella of GE is Comcast, Notable Properties, which I've never heard of, or no, pardon me, that's Notable Properties that go under GE. NBC, again, under the auspices of GE, Universal Pictures, and Focus Features. The second one is News Corp, Fox, Wall Street Journal, and the New York Post are part of News Corp. Third one is Disney. Under Disney is ABC, ESPN, Pixar, Miramar, Marner Studios. The fourth is Viacom. Under Viacom is MTV, Nick Jr., BET, that's the black channel, BET. By the way, politically correct, I don't have a problem with it, but I'm going to call your attention to a double standard. If you can have a black channel, a Spanish channel, try having a white channel, never mind if it has nothing to do with racial discussions. It's considered unacceptable and racial, thanks to this out-of-control political correctness. So anyway, under Viacom is MTV, Nick Jr., BET, CMT, and Paramount Pictures. Notice Hollywood's right in here. The fifth is Time Warner. Under Time Warner is CNN, HBO, Time, and Warner Brothers. And finally, 6 is CBS. They own this. Now, this used to be a conflict, that these could not own networks, that you could not own newspapers and television, for the very good reason of conflict. In other words, they get too much control. Now, CBS is Short Time, Smithsonian Channel, NFL.com, Jeopardy, 60 Minutes. Now, 232 media executives, that's all there are in those 6 plus their subsidiaries. They contain 232 media executives, and they control the information diet of 277 million subscribers, of which most of us are. What they say, how they report, what they think about a candidate on a regular basis, if they have a bias, 232 media executives have, again, one executive actually can influence 850,000 subscribers, each executive. Now, you don't like it maybe, but there it is. I say inquiring minds, honest minds, I don't care what party you're in, what religion, whether you're male or female, whether you're black, white, whatever you are. Is that a healthy condition? Never mind right or wrong. Is that healthy for this country? I find it frightening. Not for me, for my kids, grandkids, your kids. Are we going to leave the world a better place, or are we going to let greedy people? This is all about greed and control. My biggest problem I've had with liberals, I think, so many that I've known, dear friends, somehow part of their life is out of control, and they need to control something. They need to feel as though they have some kind of power. The other thing is a sense of humor. Did you notice? You notice how people lost any kind of a sense of humor. Now, when I taught school, I never went to class without a tie. Nice pants. I was young when I first started, 25 years old. There were young kids, there were young pretty girls, cheerleaders and all. I was a coach. All of us, you know, the kids would get crushes on you. But I didn't start doing what I saw happening in the late 70s when I got out of teaching. I saw teachers showing up unshaven, wearing dungarees, sitting on their desk, trying to be cool, trying to be one of the group, instead of recognizing there's a division between the teacher and the student. And this was tolerated. That was part of it. Also, discipline was deteriorating. And I'll tell you this, a lot of very fine teachers, right now, very fine teachers retire early because they cannot tolerate any more. When you have the four-letter words thrown around at a teacher, when you have kids back in school, I saw this, back in school after being out of control in behavior. And that, again, the court started. The court started making schools take people back that were habitual problems in the classroom. So what did the superintendents and the principals do? Raise their hands and say, what are we going to do? We got to do what the court tells us. So there you've got liberal judges in the courts. I know I use this word liberal because it is absolutely truth if you have the courage to look up these facts. Now, let's look at the population today, by the way. Do you know that by 2043, they estimate, 2043, the white population will no longer be the majority? Now, some might say, oh, that's fine. Just like we still have people that consider themselves Christian. Now, this country was founded on Christian Judeo principles. It was founded on the Ten Commandments. It was founded on a belief in Jesus Christ as well as the Old Testament, which was not Jesus Christ, but it was Christian. Now, I guess it's cool, and I guess it's enlightened if you want to dismantle everything that we have now. Everything we have right now, because of gutless politicians who, again, are looking for votes rather than doing what's right. Do you know that the Supreme Court building has the Ten Commandments on the building in 3 different places? It has the Ten Commandments on the doors going into the Supreme Court building, yet they voted down so that towns could not and cannot have the Ten Commandments displayed on one of their buildings, even though the population still considers 72 to 73% of the total American population considers themselves to be Christian. Minorities now have taken over the Democratic Party goals. It's not about fairness now, it's, again, about control. So let's look at the population. This is 2011, which was the last, census. A total of 308,745,538 people. Again, that's not talking about the illegals that aren't counted. That's why you'll hear the figure 330. Imagine. They have no problem saying there's probably almost 30 million here illegally. The white race is 63.7%. Now, in 2000, it was 75.1%. Now, this is interesting because of the way things are being done by the media. I hope you're able to connect these dots that I'm giving you. The black population is only 12.2% now. That's all. I've been telling people on my radio it was 13.6, which I thought it was. I looked this up before I came in today. 10 years ago, it was higher, 12.3%. American Indians and Alaskan Natives represent today 7%, 2000 they were 8.9%. Hispanic or Latin is 16.3% now versus 12.5% in 2000. Asian is 4.7%, which is up from, in 10 years, 3.6%. Now, before people get, you can think anything you want of me. I've never been a racist. I was in athletics, I coached, I've been with all kinds of people. I've never been homophobic. I've had women that work for me as managers. I had dearly beloved gay couples, both male and female, that came to my restaurants. I used to have great entertainers in my restaurants, and they would come after the Melody Tent down in Hyannis, and so all sorts of artistic, wonderful people came. I'm just qualifying that this is about, are we willing today to look at facts and deal with the facts? Now my last venture was the Cranebrook restaurant here in Carver. Now just show you about business. I've said the Democratic Party is anti-business, and I firmly believe they are. They do not understand because they do not have bottom line people for the most part. That is that the costs of any business cannot continue to skyrocket, and the ability to bring customers in minimized because they're taxing the general population. John F. Kennedy once said, and I quote again, "Without a healthy business community, you can never have a strong economy." Now on my radio show, I played that in his words. He got in trouble with the Pentagon because before he went in to discuss the budget, he finds out with his reporters, with his people on his staff, and I've got them right on. You can get them on the internet now, which is wonderful. There's a lot of availability of information right from the person himself, and he went crazy. You hear him getting angry. He said, "For God's sake, they're spending $5,000 to buy a bed, and here they want us to go and support their budget." I mean, these are the things that go on in government. Why? No bottom line. Just raise people's taxes. Again, nothing to do with your party. This is how the politicians work. This is how the politicians get reelected, because they prey on our inherent greed. That's why we have the 7 deadly sins, which we never talk about in schools. So anyway, the big thing is what I'm hopefully that you're getting when it comes to your town meetings, when it comes to businesses, when you build new buildings. We see it in Carver. Huge fire station, and I really love the firemen. They do a wonderful job, not only personally, but they are very cost conscious in terms of how they've run the fire department. But now we have sidewalks that nobody walks on. Nobody will use those sidewalks because I was told the state paid for these sidewalks, and you had to have the sidewalks. Now follow a bus. I don't care where your town is. See how often the bus stops now. I'm not talking about little toddlers. I'm talking about, middle school or younger. They've got people so afraid that their child is going to be kidnapped or because of what the media reports it. Frightens the mothers. They're off working now. That's the other thing. We have working mothers that we didn't have when I was growing up. Some of them, it's a choice. Now, it's a necessity because of the huge tax burdens that are being placed on the everyday middle-class American, especially in the East Coast and in the West Coast. So, what we're talking about here then is what picture do we see locally and otherwise. So I'm giving you my experience. When I bought the Cranebrook restaurant on Tremont Street, the property taxes were $3,161, 2004. Now, no town water, no town sewage. Now remember, I've owned big restaurants in Falmouth. I owned the Flying Bridge. I had 3 different restaurants in Hyannis. But there were provisions that came with your tax bill. So no septic. I had to put in a $50,000 septic because it's near a pond. Then no water, so I had to put in an $8,000 well. And when I finally, because of weather, we had those 2 winters, you know, people could not get out, wouldn't come out because dangerous. Doesn't matter if you're a town employee, though, you're going to get paid. My girls, I used to give them money, and they'd show up, or I'd tell them to stay home. That's the difference in a business. So when I had to finally close the place, the taxes had gone in 6 years. They had gone, 6 or 7 years. They had gone from $3,161 to $10,400. What did I get for that? What does any businessman? Nothing. Just another tax bill. That's almost triple. Well, it is triple. Look at your homes. And this isn't just Carver, by the way. I'm not picking on Carver. But I'm saying this is the way towns and states operate now. There's a no ending of taxing. I drive down 3A over in Plymouth. Beautiful homes all the way down there heading on 3A. And let me tell you, they've been for sale. Some of those big houses overlooking the water, they've been for sale for over 3 years. Some of them 4 years. They can't sell them. Why? Because the taxes are $50,000. Plymouth is going to lose $10 million in tax income when the power plant shuts down, and the town fathers say they've got it covered. How have they got it covered? That's just one thing. They built another school. Now, again, you can be offended if you're a member of the town fathers. That's too bad. I'm talking for what's happening in this country and what happens when their tax bills continue to skyrocket. People don't have spendable income to support the businesses. They don't go out to eat. Lunches are way off in the restaurant industry nationwide. Why? Too expensive. Why? Because the utilities, costs of payroll. Hillary Clinton talking about one of the first things when she raising the minimum wage. Oh, it sounds so wonderful. Oh, she's so terrific. Our kids, most people don't even know what raising the minimum wage, first of all, what its real motivation is, but secondly, how negatively it affects the economy. Not because businesses are too cheap to pay that. It's because the cost of payroll is one of the only things left today that a business can control. You go to small businesses now, family-owned businesses, and you're going to see them, the owners lots of times, working most of the time because they can't afford to pay the wages now in many. I'm not talking about Walmart, so don't throw that out. Walmart, again, there's greed in certain companies, and there's no question about it. But they are such a minimal amount of locations compared, even though they've got I don't know how many stores. Compared to small business owners, it's minuscule. But I'll tell you, I know most people listening to me right now don't know that your employer, me, when I had 18 employees, most of them part-time, waitresses and bartenders, and some of the kitchen guys were full-time. But they did not know that every bit of money that's taken out of your check for Social Security has to be matched by the town, by the businessman or woman. A lot of people don't know that. My little place, I brought that up again, $600 a week on top of payroll I had to pay to Social Security, matching it. I'll bet a lot of you don't know that. So that means when the town's given a raise to whether it be the teachers or anybody else, on top of the raise, and they will generally, they might include it in the total, but they will not inform a town meeting all that there's going to be a big impact, depending upon the number of people and the amount of raise, there's going to be a big impact on the costs of the town for Social Security. Now, one of the reasons Democrats and liberals and Hillary, they want to raise money, they don't understand this, that when Jack Kennedy used to give tax credits because he knew that people, when big businesses got a tax credit, they hired more people. When taxes continue to skyrocket, when you make doing business tougher, down go the jobs. This is facts, ladies and gentlemen. Trump is talking, now they're giving him a hard time because he's been successful keeping Carrier, the air conditioning company, from moving. Now, I'm sure that he said there's going to be a tax credit. Well, that's 1,000 jobs he's going to keep here. It isn't rocket science, but if you are so set in your ways that you don't want to hear the truth about how an economy works, then there's no hope, because we can't. If you're a public employee and there was one I talked about on the radio, 23 detectives in Boston got a raise. Guess what those 23 men, that's all, 23 men, maybe some women too, I don't know, they were detectives anyway, $4 million. And they didn't, Menino was even against it. But they voted for it. So how are we doing for time here, Richard?
12 minutes.
12 minutes? Oh, very good. Thank you. My friend Richard here. So I've been on a rant here, but I have to say, at my age and at this stage in my life, I just care so much for every one of you out there listening. I'm not here to finger point. I'm not here to criticize. Only, though, if the truth is there and you just put blinders on because it's you feel disloyal. Let me tell you, this election, like it or not, saw, and it's documented, thousands and thousands of Democrats left their party. Now, why? We all know, you don't need a PhD to know that Donald Trump was flawed. You don't need to ask me or other people who've been around politics and in business, would you have preferred someone else like Pence? Yes. But that's what it is. And it was so obvious to those of us that are willing to be open-minded that this was not about whether you like Trump or not. This was about one political party and a particular person, Hillary Clinton, being unacceptable in the general population. Economically. And the health care plan. Now remember, Obama just barely he twisted arms to get that Obamacare passed. Over half of the people out there didn't want it. And that's unheard of to have that many people. And they weren't the insurance companies. But remember about socialism. Look it up. I wonder if kids in school know what the USSR stood for. That's been gone for several years now, quite a few years. United Soviet Socialist Republic. What is socialism? Socialism is when government runs your life one way or the other. And if you are around and in your job strictly so that you'll always get a raise whether you show up or not, when you have public employees selling their sick days, they're sick. My grandfather, we all worked at the Quincy shipyard. My grandfather lost a leg, no insurance. My grandmother was taken in laundry, 3 kids, no one to help. Years later, same thing. Finally, they got sick days and they got medical care. Why? Not so you can sell them, not so you can gather them together in a huge, like these politicians do. Bulger, all the rest of them, getting who was it that got $200,000 in sick and vacation time not used? Sick days are for protection of the working man and woman today. In many cases, single parents who know if they contract cancer, if they have a bad heart, their kids aren't going to starve. They aren't going to be without income. That's what sick days are for. So I'm getting the time part. So hopefully we will continue at different intervals with my friend Richard, and Kenny Bukes, I hope, will be back. And we will get back to our other format. We'll have some guests on, but I have several shows in me to try to do the same vein of what I did today. Not personal, strictly principle. That's what this today, I hope, impressed you with. Not impressed you, but that you got that, because my background is not one political party or one political belief. It isn't. But you know, if things aren't working, if you see hard-working people paying the freight for non-working people, you see our veterans waiting months for health care, and someone comes in here illegally, and if they get hurt or something, they get free health care. I mean, it's not about being kind. It's about being stupid. And like Ron White says, you know, if you get a broken arm, you go to a doctor and he'll set it, and you'll be as good as new. If your appendix bursts, you go to an operation, you'll be as good as new. If your hearing's bad, you go and you get a hearing aid. If your teeth are bad, you go to a dentist. But you know, and they'll fix you as good as new. But you know one thing? They can't fix stupid. There's not a pill for it. There's not a course you can take. I don't know if you know who Ron White is. Do you know him, Richie? Ron White? He says, stupid is forever. And that's not insulting. It's just, do you see in front of you what has worked and what isn't working, and are you willing to change it? So this is Don McKeag, thanking you for listening and wishing you a happy Christmas that's coming up. I hope you all had a wonderful Thanksgiving. That's another thing we are grateful for in this wonderful country of ours, that we continue to have celebrations where everyone can take part in them, and they and their family can benefit and make this country great again. Doesn't mean Donald Trump, but all of us should be willing to get the facts straight and do our part. Thanks very much. I'm Don McKeag, signing off.